Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, Good Fences Make Good Neighbors So Long as They Are in the Right Place. Posted by user PogWizRedux on our own subreddit r/ripestories. This is a story of how not to treat your new neighbors after buying a house. The year is 2005. I live in an apartment in a building that my parents own, which happens to be right next door to the house I grew up in. My parents had basically bought the building in order to choose their neighbors after the last neighbors had been awful people and had finally moved away. The house on the other side of the apartment building went up for sale and a new couple bought the house. Everything seemed normal, the husband, douchebag, and his wife seemed nice enough. For context, we live in a summer tourist town. Many of the homes here are summer houses owned by people from nearby states. It's been this way for 150 years. My family was one of the few that lived here year-round. Our neighbors on the other side of our family home were seasonal people and we had a great relationship with them. We would watch their house while they were away, mow their lawn, etc. and in exchange we would be able to park in their driveway when they were not in town, play in their yard when we were kids, etc. Everyone wins. When the new neighbors moved in, we attempted to have a similar relationship with them. We like having happy neighbors since it just makes life better for everyone. In the beginning, that is how things were as well. We would mow their lawn when we did ours and maintain the shared alleyway. This shared alleyway is where the trouble brews. The block is curved, so the alley is kind of shaped like a wedge. The houses are only about 10 to 15 feet apart, depending where in the alley you are. Previous owners had kept it all open, no fences, no bushes, it was mowed by whoever happened to be mowing. Well, the new owners liked having a fence. They let my father know that they wanted to install a fence down the alleyway. That is their right to do so, if a little out of the norm of how the community handles things here. The problem is that they hired a very cheap surveyor and they got the lines wrong. Very wrong. Since the block is curved, the difference is different depending on what side of the block you are on. On the inside of the curve it is only off by about a foot, on the outside of the curve 8 feet. As I said, this is an old community, their houses and lots are small, most houses only having 3 to 6 feet between them, so 8 feet is a huge deal. My father lets him know we think that their survey results are incorrect. He had calculated on his own that if those lines were true, it would put the property line of my apartment building down the middle of our family's house next door. It would put the property line of my family's home through the good neighbor's house on the other side, and so on. My father asks douchebag if they can hold off on installing any fence so we can have our own surveyors check the lines and we would pay for it. Douchebag agrees. We schedule the original surveyor that made the lots 150 years ago to come and survey. However, they wouldn't be there until the fall, which was a couple months away. Douchebag says he is fine waiting and wants to be a good neighbor. Great news. Well, not so fast. About a month later, I wake up to the sound of hammers and saws outside my window. There was a crew installing a fence. We talked to the crew who were very sympathetic and scared, but did not stop installing the fence. My father called douchebag to ask what was going on. D-bag tells my father that they had decided that the original results were correct and they had the right to install their fence and the verbal agreement they had to wait did not matter. To say that we were angry is an understatement. We felt betrayed, we resisted the urge to take petty revenge. Well, my father resisted the urge for petty revenge. Let's just say that I had some parties where some guests had gotten confused about where the bathroom was. We got the survey done successfully and wouldn't you know it, but my father was correct about the lines. In fact, his amateur surveying was within 6 inches of the official line. We had a lawyer friend draft a letter asking them to move the fence within 60 days. Douchebag tried to fight it, but the survey was clear. The surveyor he had hired didn't measure anything on his own, he based everything off of a single property pin he found several houses down. That pin had been arbitrarily placed there by the homeowners over that way when it was moved by accident. After the 60 days had passed, we sent another registered letter to him, again asking to have the fence moved. He ignored us again. Now it was time to act. My father and I got up early one late fall morning at dawn and got to work. Douchebag was in his home state at this point, several hours away. We knew that he had made friends with a neighbor across the street and they would let him know something was going on, so we had to work fast. The fence was not terribly long, maybe 60 to 80 feet long or so. We carefully dismantled each section and stacked them neatly on his lawn, pulled up all of the posts and stacked those neatly too, and then we installed a new fence along the correct property line. A chicken wire fence. It was glorious and awful looking, it was just perfect. Sure enough, douchebag arrived mid-morning. He called the cops, but the cops couldn't do anything. He tried to pull up one of the metal posts, but was not strong enough. He thought we cemented them in, but we didn't. He was just weak. We know that he started looking at options to sue, but he didn't have a leg to stand on. We had done everything by the book and no court would let him restore his fence to our property. The aftermath: during that winter my father received a call from douchebag Surveyor. Turns out douchebag was suing him for doing a bad job. He was operating without insurance, so losing his case would cost him his license and possibly his house. He begged my parents to do something. My father explained that this had nothing to do with us and we certainly would not be pretending that his survey was the valid one. He would need to sort this issue out with douchebag and asked him never to contact us again. I'm not really sure what he was expecting us to do about the lawsuit against him. D-Bag sent a letter to my father the next year, presumably after spending the winter months trying to find a way to win his case, conceding defeat and asking if we could please take down the fence so he can have his fence reinstalled on the property line. We removed the fence since it was never intended to be permanent, but we would have preferred no fence at all. He had his fence reinstalled and we confirmed it was on the property line. Then I planted thorn bushes, raspberries and blackberries next to the fence. I wanted to make sure it was clear about how welcome he was to try and cross the property line again. They are still there 16 years on. Relations have slowly moved from cold to cool over the years, but there won't be any trust there or the type of relationship that we had fostered with our other neighbors. No other issues have arisen and we generally keep our distance. They could have had good, helpful neighbors, but decided they wanted the extra few feet of property more and ended up with nothing to show for it, except maybe a berry that grew over their side of the fence. And thank you very much user PogWizRedux for posting this awesome story on our own subreddit. As you might know guys, at the moment I primarily read stories about neighbors and especially neighbors who take your own property in some way or another, so these stories are especially appreciated at the moment. However, you can still post all of the other stories, I will still read them. Thank you very much. And the next one is titled, Neighbor parks in my space and then gets me towed. Does the same to my new neighbor who happens to be a cop. I used to live in an apartment that had assigned covered parking for $25 extra per month. I went for it and got lucky and got the spot right outside my back door. You got a sticker for your window that had your covered spot number on them. The overzealous tow service they used would tow any non-payer out in like 10 minutes after they parked and went away from their car. Which was great. When some jackass parked in my spot, it was very clearly marked all over the place that covered was for those assigned to them only. And a-holes would park there anytime it rained or later at night, so I would come in and not be able to park. Well, then Susan moved in. She lived 3 apartments down from me and there was a fire lane right outside her apartment and a hydrant. She would still park there and got ticketed for it several times, never paid the tickets, more on that later. Well, she got towed once and met Ratty, this is seriously the name the tow truck driver went by. Well, the building knew this because she bragged about it and gave him a sexual service, so he brought her car back and did not tow her again. This included when she parked in covered parking and she decided she wanted my spot. She actually had him tow me from my spot once, and he refused to tow her when I got home late and she had parked there. So I complained to the complex and they said I had to prove it, not to make waves, etc. And I had paid for the year for the parking policy, so I demanded a refund and they said sorry, but no. Retty told me flat out if she told him to tow me, he would do it and I best just give her the spot and call it a gift. I told him to duck off. Well, when she could not get him to tow it, he was still towing and doing his job and he was married and could not always get away to do this, she still parked by the hydrant and kept getting tickets and not paying them. Well, one day Mike moved in and got the pay spot next to mine. Mike was a state trooper and while he drove his cop car home, he parked it in a secondary spot the complex gave him that was more visible. He got a discount on rent to park it there and to walk around the complex once a night and respond if needed. Well, he parked his truck next to mine in a paid spot that he paid for. Now, Mike was awesome and I still hang out with him sometimes. Just saying, one day Susan parked in his spot, she did not know he was a state trooper, and then Retty refused to tow her car out of the spot. Mike told him he was a state trooper, Retty said he didn't care. This is over the phone and Mike told me that Retty kept saying, "You all say you're cops and that's illegal. I ain't coming." When he came over to have a beer and tell me about it, I said, well, she has about 50 tickets over the last year and a half and she brags that she has never paid them. So he ran her plates and sure enough she had multiple warrants for non-payment of the tickets. When she went out the next evening, a fellow cop pulled her over and arrested her. She not only resisted, she kicked him in the balls and maced him and ran. So she was arrested for about 25 or so traffic warrants, flight and assaulting a cop. She had drugs on her, an illegal handgun that had been used in a shooting about a decade before, and a few large adult toys. Not judging, it's just how it was. She was also under the influence and she was pretty stoned. Her car was towed, not by Retty. I think she went to state jail but may have been to prison as well. She was evicted and they found crap tons of drugs, stolen merchandise she was stealing from stores, still in the boxes in a lot of cases, so she got more charges added on to her. I did sue the complex for refusing to refund when I was illegally towed and for not towing her. I won and they had to refund the year, pay for the times I was towed and for some of my time and hassle. And they gave me the spot for a year for free, but I moved soon after. And guys, if you have watched until here and enjoy the crazy neighbor stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much for your daily support, it is very much appreciated and helps me tremendously. And the next one is another little bonus story from user ErnieSCH on our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it is titled "This is roughly 40 years ago." Warning, a long one, but I think you will enjoy it. This goes back many years to a point where smoking was still allowed in factories. The company I worked for made parts for packaging various products that were dispensed by aerosol spray. I was the production maintenance supervisor. I had 11 mechanics reporting to me, covering 3 shifts. I spent a majority of my salaried 8-hour day repairing automated assembly machines as I was the only one who could figure out a lot of the problems. I was really good at my job. After 5 years though, the pay could have been better. I was a salaried employee, so except for Sundays and holidays when emergency repairs had to be done, I was not paid overtime. Now, the company wanted to get into another product line and hired a well-qualified man, about 10 years my senior, to handle R&D. We will call him AAH for arrogant a-hole. After my 8 hours, I would leave the production floor in the hands of my second shift lead and head for my office to purchase hardware and parts, go over timesheets and track repair times, and maybe head for the machine shop to make custom parts for machines. This was 2 to 4 hours most evenings, for which I didn't get paid. I had 2 small children at home and rarely saw them 6 days a week. My wife was frazzled from her motherly duties, and since I was not around to help, she was turning in about the time I got home, leaving me on my own to get the boys to bed, feed myself, and unable to fulfill some other needs. I requested another mechanic to take some of the load off me so I could spend more time with my family. Fast forward a couple months, I have met the new man briefly, but had little to no interaction with him. The project he had been hired for was cancelled, and rather than let him go, they were looking for another position for him. Remember, I had asked for additional manpower. So it is 10 minutes to 4 and the second shift is coming in and first shift is cleaning up. A second shift mechanic stopped to read the bulletin board and almost sprinted up to me asking if I had seen the new announcement. I went to read it. The company in its infinite wisdom had decided that AAH would henceforth be production maintenance supervisor. I was not happy. A few minutes later, here comes the production manager, PM, not my boss. I reported to the VP of Engineering, VPE, with AAH to introduce him to my staff. Names are exchanged, hands shaken, pleasantries exchanged until he got to me. I had been standing quietly planning the next move in my career, and as AAH was introduced to me, I was putting a cigarette in my mouth and fumbling for a light. AAH comes up with a butane lighter, holds it to my smoke, and then grinning, he moved the lighter under my chin. I have always worn a full beard and had set it on fire before accidentally. I reacted, let's say, violently. I threw a right hand at his chin and knocked him out. He was sprawled on a workbench and slid to the floor for maybe 15 seconds. He picked himself up without help from 8 of my lovely former workers or PM and heads half running, half wobbling towards the VPE's office, and I followed. Now, VPE's desk faces the door, and when I get there, AAH is almost screaming at VPE, saying he needs to fire OP, aka me. VPE says, "OP has been here for 5 years, and you've been his boss for 10 minutes. AAH says that I had punched him and he thinks I may have broken his jaw. VPE rolls his eyes and glances my way. I am standing in the doorway behind AAH. AAH is talking without a problem, so it is very unlikely that his jaw is broken. VPE says, "Why?" AAH says, "All I did was light his smoke and playfully move the lighter towards his chin." VPE again glances my way and grins. He strokes his, think ZZ top, beard and says, "I'd probably done the same thing. Get your ass downstairs and apologize to him now." I about ran down the stairs and collected all of my guys that were still there and said, "Watch this." AAH walks up to me and asks if he can speak to me in private. I tell him that anything he has to say to me can be said in front of my mechanics. His apology was pretty good and sounded almost sincere. I said nothing and went home. For about 8 months I was doing my job, but no clerical work or ordering, at the same salary for precisely 8 hours per day. AAH eventually acquired sources for supplies on his own. I had removed my contacts, purchase order book and all correspondence from my former desk. I was having a blast with the kids and the wife, seeing I was managing the boys in the evening, got back into the bedroom for something other than sleep in a big way. Life was good. Here comes the 4th of July weekend. We had a machine that needed a major rebuild that would have been impossible to do while workers were there. Since we had a 3-day weekend, AAH, with my help, got all parts and supplies necessary for the rebuild, and we were to work on Friday the 4th and Saturday at double time, with Sunday available if needed. Since there were 2 well-qualified people, I didn't think we would need Sunday, but thought that it was the best way to schedule everything. We worked 12 hours on Friday, and I noticed AAH was taking longer to do things than he should have. We got to about the 6-hour mark on Saturday and he was still slacking off. It occurred to me that he was wanting to stretch out the hours into another day. I wanted to spend Sunday with my kids, so I doubled down and shamed him into finishing the job at 14 hours on Saturday. I told him I would see him Monday morning. Monday morning he calls me into his/my office. He shows me the timesheets he is about to turn in for us. I noticed he had added about 10 hours on Sunday. Now this was around 300 bucks, hard to pass up, but no, his ass is mine. He asked me to drop payroll in the office and I grabbed the stack and headed to payroll. I asked the pay lady to set my sheet aside and to process the rest. I went from there to the vice president's office. I knocked and he looked up from a phone call and motioned me to sit. We will call him Sam. He and I were good friends. His call ended and he asked what I needed. I said, "Sam, do you remember when you posted a memo about a reward for anyone stealing from the company or its workers?" He nods. I say, "Well, write me a check for 500 bucks. His eyes grew wide. "For?" I told him about the 10 hours on AAH and my timesheets and that I had told payroll not to process mine until she heard from you. He wrote a check then and there. He got this big grin and said, "I don't want to fire him." I said, "Make me his supervisor and I will handle that for you, Sam." Sam said, "Done. I suppose we should tell him." He picked up the phone and paged AAH to his office. A minute later, AAH comes striding into Sam's office with a big smile that melted the second he saw me sitting there. Sam, "AAH, as of today, you will be reporting to OP." AAH looked like he had been shot in the gut. Sam went on, "I believe OP has something to say here," glancing at me and grinning. I said, "Thank you, Sam. Yes, I do. AAH, you have 15 minutes to clear out your desk of your personal property and leave the premises. A check will be mailed to you on Thursday for your final pay, less any bogus hours on the timesheets." That was a great week. I got the $500 reward, my regular pay plus 36 hours at double time despite working just 26. I asked payroll about the extra 10 hours and she sent me to Sam. Sam told me he was only following what I had said to AAH, smiled and invited me out for dinner and drinks after work. He told me not to worry about the 10 hours, it had been deducted from AAH's final check. After dinner, he slid the bill to me. I must have rolled my eyes a bit. He pulled it back and said, "You should be paying for dinner. You made more money than I did this week." And thank you very much, Ernie, for posting this amazing story. I gotta say, this was probably one of the most entertaining stories I've ever read on Reddit. Absolutely glorious. Thank you so much. And if any of you have any other interesting stories to share, then please feel free to go to r/ripe stories on Reddit, post your own story there, and there is a good chance that I might also read it in a video. And guys, unfortunately we have already reached the end of the video. However, this is not the end of ripe content for you. I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will hopefully soon show up on the left corner of the screen, which will provide you with hundreds if not thousands of hours of ripe content. If you still haven't gotten enough, then please also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you will only find on there. Furthermore, if you want to share your own story with our community, then please head on over to r/ripe stories on Reddit, where you can share your own stories and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. Thank you so much for your daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.